bring in Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, and, of course, lead content strategist for the Monday Morning Quarterback. Where do you think we stand with the Jets there, Albert?
I think they're still open to moving Darnold. I think if somebody had given them their price, they may have moved him already. And I think that price is probably around a second-round pick and something else. Maybe in between like what the Niners got for Alex Smith all those years ago, which was 2 2s, and what the Cardinals got for Josh Rosen in 2019, which is a 2 and a 5. So, I think they're still, very open to listening to offers. 8 teams have called them on Sam Darnold, so there has been some level of interest. And I think for the new GM, Joe Douglas, who's been there for a couple of years now, actually, the new coach, Robert Saleh, really the ideal for them was to be able to see the quarterbacks throw live and get all of their medicals before moving Darnold or making a final decision to move Darnold. And Zach Wilson throws tomorrow. Justin Fields throws next week. So by the time we get to the middle of next week, the Jets are going to have seen everyone throw live. And I think they're going to have a better idea of what they're looking at with the BYU quarterback, with the Ohio State quarterback. They've obviously already seen Trey Lance throw. So I still think the likelihood is they take Zach Wilson and find a way to move Sam Darnold. But they've been trying to, I think, maintain some level of flexibility here until they actually get to see these guys throw. And it's important to remember, Dan, too, it's a very different year. Scouts really weren't on the road in the fall. There was no combine. So, Joe Douglas physically has not been eye to eye with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields yet. And making a final decision on one of those guys without actually being able to size them up, with your own eyes, to tie your job security to that guy, which is what you're doing if you take a quarterback second overall, it's a scary thing to do. So these are an important couple of days ahead for the Jets.
But also leverage-wise, that you don't want to tip your hand if you're the Jets, that you still want to have that mystery of, are we keeping Darnold? Do you want that number 2 pick? If you trade Darnold, then everybody knows what you're doing with the number 2 pick.
Right. And I think they still really like Darnold. That's the thing about it. They really do like Sam. I think they just feel like at this point, they either have to go all in on him or cut the cord. And really that's logistically where they are in the contract. After 3 years, the way these contracts work with first round picks, that's where the decision point comes. That's when you have to make a decision on the 5th-year option. These guys become eligible for long-term deals at the same time. So, you're sending a signal what you think of the guy after year 3, because you have to make the decision on the 5th-year option, and you have to make a decision on whether or not to extend him. And so that's sort of why I think they are where they are with Sam. Would they like to see him for a couple more years? Sure. If they had him at a good rate, that'd be fine. The fact is they'd have to pay him almost $20 million to keep him in 2022, which makes that decision, I think, a little more difficult. But, to your point, maintaining, the mystery till draft day, might be the smart move. It's what the Cardinals did, right? The Cardinals wouldn't tip their hand to anybody. Now, I think some of us knew that Kyler Murray was probably going to be the pick for a couple weeks leading up to that draft, but they held on to Josh Rosen all the way up until draft day and didn't move him actually until the day after they took Kyler Murray.
I was also told by a source the safest pick in the draft, aside from Trevor Lawrence. You want to guess?
Besides Trevor Lawrence?
Yes.
Kyle Pitts.
Patrick Surtain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Said
that's interesting. Surtain's interesting in that he's got NFL bloodlines. He's his tape is very, very clean. What they say about Surtain is that maybe he doesn't have the ceiling that Virginia Tech's Caleb Farley or South Carolina's J.C. Horn have. He's not quite the freak athlete that those guys are. But I think, I think whoever told you that, Dan, I 100% see what they're saying, because, he's sort of, I can't imagine you find too many NFL people that would look at him and not think this guy's a 10-year starter in the league. Now, will he become Darrelle Revis? Maybe Horn or Farley have a better chance of being that sort of player. But I don't think there's any question that there's a consensus that Surtain's going to step into the NFL and be a really solid player.
All right, explain to me what's going on with Green Bay, because it feels like it's either something good for Aaron Rodgers or it's something bad for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, well, I think all the talk of the, of the renegotiation, And I think one thing we all have to remember here, when players restructure their contracts, they're really not giving up anything, right? They're basically moving money around, and sometimes they're getting the cash in their pocket faster, which can help the team from a cap standpoint. That's all that's really happening in most of these cases. There are cases where there are pay cuts. This isn't going to be one of those. And there are, in a lot of cases, triggers in the player's contract where they can do these things automatically. I think that the Packers, if they're going to restructure Aaron Rodgers, they're going to go to him first. And to me, like, this would seem to be like an elegant solution, right? Like, if you go to Aaron Rodgers and you say, okay, like, we're going to continue building the team that we've built, and we're not going to veer off of the way that we've tried to put this whole thing together, but we're going to work with you. So we're going to restructure you. We're going to get some money in your pocket a little bit earlier than you would have gotten it otherwise. And we're going to use the cap savings to go add player X, player Y, or player Z. To me, like, that would be a very elegant way of addressing the concern that Aaron Rodgers has, that the Packers aren't working with enough urgency, working with, say, the urgency the Chiefs have with Patrick Mahomes or the Buccaneers have with Tom Brady, and saying, like, okay, like, we've got X amount of cap space. We're going to work with you to try and improve the team, but we're still not going to veer off of what our principles have been in putting this whole thing together.
But at some point, what are the Packers doing with Jordan Love? Because the benefit is the rookie contract, but we don't know if he can play. And at some point, don't either you admit you made a mistake, or you say to Aaron Rodgers after next year, Aaron, thank you, but now we got to. I mean, this is the reason why you moved up in the draft, to get him in the first place.
I think the comparison that you want to look at here, like everybody out there listening wants to look at, was the Patriots drafting Jimmy Garoppolo in 2014. When the Patriots took Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Brady was getting older. He wasn't pleased with his contract situation. And like, I think the Patriots knew that was going to go up Tom Brady's tailpipe. At that point, one of two things was going to happen, right? Okay. Either A, Tom Brady was going to be reinvigorated and challenged and play at the top of his game, or B, Brady was going to age and they were going to have a guy in place to replace him. I think the exact same thing applies here. I think the logic for the Packers in taking Jordan Love last year was identical. You bring him in, right? And you hope that maybe where the relationship's gotten a little strained, now you get a super motivated player. What happened? He was the MVP of the league, Dan, right? And so, like, you get this super motivated player, and going forward now, you also have the potential successor on the roster. And so if he falls off at all over the next 2 or 3 years, well, then, you've got a tough decision to make, but at least you're not in the wilderness looking for a quarterback. You've got an answer there on the roster. And like, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario, and I don't even want to call this the worst case scenario. I mean, in Brady's case, what happened? Brady kept beating Garoppolo out. I mean, Belichick started to build a team for Garoppolo. Like the Brandon Cooks trade, when they traded for Brandon Cooks, that was for Jimmy Garoppolo. That was a receiver that fit Jimmy Garoppolo's skill set. And Brady kept playing at the level that he had been playing over the course of the first 15 years of his career. After the Jimmy Garoppolo trade, Tom Brady won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, and the Patriots wound up having to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. So that would be like, to me, it's like, it's either A, Rodgers ages out and you've got Jordan Love on the roster to replace him, or B, Rodgers plays his ass off, and now all of a sudden 2 years from now, you're in a position where maybe you have to think about trading Jordan Love.
Albert Breer, the senior NFL reporter for the MMQB. I was wondering about the Texans situation with Deshaun Watson. I don't know what they knew and when they knew it, because let's say in January they knew that this was lurking, this was on the horizon, or they didn't know. Imagine if they had traded him in January.
I know.
And then it came out now, Albert, that did the Texans know? Could you void a deal? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious about the timing of all of this and what the Texans knew, and that they didn't, trade him at that time.
Yeah, I have a hard time with it too, because I'm not sure what they knew either. And I think it's hard to have a take on this, because either A, if you have a take on it, you're indicting Watson, which isn't fair, especially considering, what sort of citizen he's been prior to all of this, both as a college player and as pro player, or you're B, not taking the allegations seriously enough. And so, I think we have to let this play out. I wish I could tell you what the Texans knew in December and January. I haven't gotten any indication that they knew this was coming.
Okay.
And I think that Nick Caserio, I could tell you what Nick Caserio has told teams when they've called on Deshaun Watson, which is basically, you can ask me about any player on the roster except the quarterback. So they flat out haven't made him available. If they had an inkling that there was trouble coming down the line, maybe they would have. I'm not sure. But I do know that this puts everybody in a really difficult spot, because the Texans cannot justify moving on from a 25-year-old franchise quarterback without getting a historic haul in return. And on the flip side of it, if you're the Broncos or the Panthers or the Jets or the Dolphins or the Niners, at this point, can you part with a historic haul to get Deshaun Watson without clarity on this situation? I've talked to a couple teams that are involved in this, Dan, that have said flat out, no, like, we can't do it right now. We have to wait. And because our owner's not going to let us do it. And we can't put our jobs on the line that way. So we have to kind of let this thing play out and get some clarity on the situation before we go forward. So you never say never, because, maybe something happens and somebody takes a wild swing at Deshaun Watson, thinks they can get a bargain now, and the Texans feel like it's time to move on. I don't know. But I mean, for the most part, like the way I see it, and people I've talked to over the last week about this, I think it effectively is going to freeze the trade market for Deshaun Watson.
But if the season was starting, he would be on the commissioner's exempt list, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I would think so.
But why isn't he now?
Because he doesn't have to be. Because the league,
okay,
the league right now doesn't have to make a big deal out of this, because there's nothing going on. Like there's no, he can't, like, off-season programs, and we don't know if they're going to start, but the Texans off-season program can't start till a week from Monday. So, I think the way the league sort of proceeded in cases like this more recently, and there was that time when, it was, commissioner, the commissioner was sort of like the hammer in these sorts of cases. And I think that they've taken, going back maybe to Antonio Brown, they've taken like a little bit more of a rehabilitative stance in these things than a punitive stance. And so I think they've been sort of careful to punish players when they don't necessarily have to. And I think at this point, the league stance on it probably would be, for right now at least, we don't have to do anything. Now, if we're going to open up off-season programs on April 5th, which is a possibility for teams with new coaches, the Texans fit into that category, maybe at that point we have to do something and say something. But like, even then, we know Deshaun Watson is not going to show up. We've already established that. So I think the league hasn't done anything at this point, because really they don't have to do anything.
I'll leave you with this. Talking to a source, and he said there is an outlier who's going to come up to the top 5. Somebody's coming into the top 5 in the draft. Now, if I say that, what would be the team that would be the outlier that you think might be trying to get into the top 5, even higher, I'm told? Mm-hmm. Who would that be?
Okay, so I think everybody knows Carolina is very quarterback hungry, right? So they're not an outlier.
No, it's not them. No.
Yeah, it's not them, because we know that I've been told their owner is quote unquote obsessed with getting a quarterback. So I'll give you 2 teams, Dan, that I think like people maybe aren't talking as much about. One would be the New England Patriots, because they built up their roster to a point where I feel like they don't have as many holes, like that they have to fill as they had maybe 2 weeks ago. And like, although Bill's history is to trade down, he has taken opportunities to move up in the past. And if you remember in 2012, they traded up twice to get Chandler Jones and Dante Hightower. So when they see something they think is really special, they'll go and get it. The other team that I think is lurking out there is the Denver Broncos. I think the Broncos could get aggressive with a quarterback if they see one that they really believe is a superstar. And so maybe they're the team that jumps from 9 to 3 to go get like a Justin Fields. And part of the reason why, they've got a new general manager in George Payton, who isn't tied to Drew Lock. If you think about it, there are major league questions about whether or not there's going to be any first-round quarterback prospects in the 2022 draft. So if you're a first-year GM, you're looking at it right now, maybe you're lukewarm on Drew Lock, and you say, okay, if we don't get one this year and there isn't going to be one next year, now I could be going into year 3 as a general manager, still looking for my guy. And so I just keep an eye on the Denver Broncos maybe getting aggressive there within the top 10.
By the way, I don't have the answer. I was just told that there is an outlier that,
Would Denver qualify as an outlier?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think so. San Francisco would qualify.
San Francisco's another one. Yeah. I mean, I think San Francisco is tied to Jimmy until they can find what they feel like what they feel like is a significant upgrade. And I've been consistent on that. I don't think they're moving. They were never moving off of Jimmy they're not moving off of Jimmy for Gardner Minshew. If Gardner Minshew is coming in there, it's as a depth piece because they feel like they need better depth at that position. But I've maintained this all along. Like, I really feel like if there was a significant upgrade, they would consider it.
Great to talk to you again, Albert. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, the senior NFL reporter, lead content strategist for the MMQB.